Every single morning, millions of Americans log into their retirement accounts. They watch the stock market hit record highs, and they believe it is a testament to the American free market. They think capitalism is working. What they don't know is that the free market died on a Monday in 1987. Right now, operating in complete, terrifying secrecy, there is an unelected shadow committee within the United States government that possesses a literal infinite checkbook. When you make a bad financial decision, you go bankrupt. But when Wall Street billionaires make catastrophic gambling errors that should wipe out their entire empires, this committee steps in, intercepts the free market, and uses taxpayer liquidity to artificially pump the stock market back up. They are the reason the megabanks never lose. They are the reason corporate executives get multi-million-dollar bonuses while your purchasing power collapses. They are officially known as the President's Working Group on Financial Markets. Wall Street calls them the Plunge Protection Team. And this is the declassified blueprint of how 4 unelected men rigged the global financial casino, murdered free market capitalism, and engineered the greatest systemic wealth transfer in human history. To understand why the government had to assassinate the free market, you have to understand the sheer, unadulterated terror of October 19th, 1987. History remembers it as Black Monday. This wasn't a standard recession. This wasn't a slow economic downturn. This was a catastrophic mathematical system failure. In a single day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average collapsed by exactly 22.6%. To put that into modern perspective, if that percentage drop happened today, it would instantly vaporize over $10 trillion of global wealth in less than 6 hours. Wall Street was in a state of absolute primal panic. Traders were physically weeping on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. The newly introduced computerized trading algorithms had initiated a death spiral. The machines were selling off assets so violently and so relentlessly that the structural integrity of the American banking system began to fracture. The United States government looked at the collapsing tickers and realized a terrifying truth. The Soviet Union was watching. The Cold War was still raging. If the American market opened the next morning and the selling continued, the United States economy would completely disintegrate by Wednesday. They needed a circuit breaker. But more importantly, the financial ruling class realized that raw, unrestricted capitalism was a threat to their own survival. True capitalism means that if you make a bad bet, you pay the ultimate price. You lose everything. Wall Street decided in that exact moment that they were no longer willing to accept the risk of bankruptcy. They demanded a permanent safety net, and the White House gave them one. On March 18, 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed Executive Order 12,631. On paper, the document sounded incredibly boring. It was buried in bureaucratic language. It established something called the Working Group on Financial Markets. It consisted of just 4 people: the Secretary of the Treasury, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve, the Chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. The mainstream media largely ignored it. The American public didn't understand it. But financial insiders and institutional bankers knew exactly what had just been birthed. A former Federal Reserve board member named Robert Heller publicly slipped up the following year, suggesting in the Wall Street Journal that the Federal Reserve could now support the stock market directly by purchasing index futures. The Washington Post caught wind of the true mandate and famously nicknamed them the Plunge Protection Team. They were given a singular, unspoken directive. The stock market must never, under any circumstances, be allowed to naturally correct itself again. If the market starts to plunge, this 4-man cartel is authorized to coordinate with the most powerful proxy banks in the world, open the liquidity floodgates, and artificially buy the market back to safety. They don't need congressional approval. They don't need a public vote. They operate entirely in the shadows, immune to the democratic process. here's the history lesson. Because if you think this is just a story about the 1980s, if you think this is just some dusty government policy that doesn't affect you, you are falling into the exact psychological trap they designed for you. For 20 years, the Federal Reserve aggressively denied that the Plunge Protection Team was actively rigging the stock market. Financial commentators called it a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. And then came the bloodbath of 2008, but they weren't. Instead, the Plunge Protection Team stepped out of the shadows, dropped the mask, and executed the greatest financial heist in human history. This is where the betrayal becomes intensely personal. In 2008, the government didn't save your house. They didn't save your job. They let Main Street burn to the ground, and they let millions of working-class families go bankrupt. What they did was use trillions of dollars of central bank liquidity to buy the toxic garbage directly off of Wall Street's balance sheets. They bailed out the exact billionaires who caused the crash. They proved on global television that the stock market is a rigged casino, and the house never, ever loses. But how exactly do they do it without leaving a paper trail? The mechanics of the rig are beautifully, terrifyingly sinister. The Plunge Protection Team doesn't just log on to an E-Trade account and buy Apple stock. That would be illegal under the Federal Reserve Act. Instead, they use proxy mercenaries. When the market starts a terrifying freefall, the chairman of the Federal Reserve will initiate emergency, closed-door calls with the prime dealers. These are the massive, untouchable institutions like J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. The Federal Reserve provides these proxy banks with unlimited, zero-interest capital through something called the repo market. The implicit off-the-books agreement is that these banks will take that infinite cash and instantly flood the futures market. They buy massive, highly leveraged contracts on the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones. This sudden, inexplicable, massive tidal wave of buying triggers the computerized trading algorithms to reverse course. The machines stop selling and they start buying just to follow the artificial momentum. The free fall is halted. The market magically recovers. The financial media goes on television the very next morning, completely oblivious to the shadow intervention, and praises the incredible resilience of the American economy. It is a complete fabrication. It is a financial hologram, projected entirely by central bank liquidity. And they did it again in March of 2020. When the global pandemic shut down the world economy, the stock market began to collapse. The Plunge Protection Team didn't even try to hide it this time. The Federal Reserve openly announced they were creating special-purpose vehicles to literally buy corporate junk bonds. They printed trillions of dollars out of thin air to ensure that while small businesses were forced into bankruptcy, corporate conglomerates saw their stock prices hit all-time highs. They privatize all of the profits for themselves, but they socialize the massive systemic losses directly onto your back. And this brings us to the ultimate devastating consequence of Executive Order 12,631. You cannot print trillions of dollars out of thin air to artificially prop up the stock market without a cost. The universe demands a balancing of the books. The bill always comes due. But Wall Street doesn't pay that bill. You do. The cost of the Plunge Protection Team is inflation. Every single time this unelected committee floods the system with fiat currency to save a failing bank, or to stop a natural market correction, they dilute the value of the dollars sitting in your bank account. This is the dirty secret of the modern American economy. This is exactly why the stock market is currently sitting at historic all-time highs, while the middle class is being completely eviscerated. This is why you are struggling to afford basic groceries, gasoline, and housing, while corporate executives are pulling down record-breaking bonuses. It is not an accident. It is not a byproduct of a cyclical economy. It is the exact mathematical outcome of a system that has been deliberately rigged to siphon your wealth upwards. The Plunge Protection Team was designed for one specific purpose: to protect the assets of the ultra-wealthy by silently destroying the purchasing power of the working class. The free market is a myth. The casino is rigged, and you are the one funding the house. The files are open. The truth is declassified. This is history declassified.